Hello. Just recently started doing these videos again. What I wanted to do today was on when the devil puts storms in your lives. So, on Bible verses I'll be using are Matthew 14:22 to 23, and in them it says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side. While he dismissed the crowd, after he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out of fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and to sink, beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed in the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Those Bible verses made me think of when the devil puts storms in our lives. So, as you go through life, you will inevitably have storms in your life. That rainy period of your life where nothing seems to go right. Some may learn they have cancer or some other terminal disease. Some may be facing financial issues. Some may be facing the uncertainty of life without a loved one. In this passage, we are going to dwell on when you find out you have these storms in your life, and how you respond to them. In other words, how do you handle them? Peter, along with the 11 other disciples, were in the boat when the storm hit. They all experienced the same wind, rain, lightning, and thunder. They, like someone who finds out that they have a terminal illness, were scared. They didn't know what was happening. They were alone and facing the unknown. We read in Matthew 23 that Jesus dismissed them, and while he went up to the mountains to pray, the disciples got in the boat to cross over to the sea to the other side. In 24, we read how the boat was a considerable distance from the land and buffeted by waves because the wind was against it. In 25, we see that just before dawn, Jesus went to them walking on the water. We also read that the disciples were scared when they saw Jesus. Peter was also scared, but he had the courage to get out of the boat and go to Jesus. Peter, in the middle of the storm, placed himself in Jesus' control. He got out of the boat and relied on Jesus to protect him. Now, I want you to notice that he walked to Jesus. Jesus could have easily walked to Peter to protect and comfort him. We know that Jesus is our great protector and redeemer. Here, though, he required Peter to walk in faith and to trust in him. In verse 29 through 31, we read how Peter got out of the boat and went to Jesus. We also see in the verses that when he saw the wind and the storm, he was afraid and started to sink, crying out to Jesus, "Lord, save me." Peter lost sight of God. He let his circumstances dictate what his response was, which caused him to start sinking. We read in verse 31 that Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. We also read how Jesus responded to Peter by saying, "You of little faith, why did you doubt me?" Or why did you doubt? I think that in that question, he wasn't scolding Peter, yet asking why he took his concentration away from Jesus. How many of us in life do that? How many of us find out that we or a loved one has cancer or some other terminal disease that is going to cut our life short? How many of us are going through a rough patch in life financially? How many of us get so wrapped up in the storm of our lives that we lose sight of Jesus and we begin to sink under the storm? Peter had the faith to get out of the boat during the storm in his life and go to Jesus for assurance, but the physical world got into his head. And so how many of us do the same thing? How many of us, while trusting that Jesus is going to protect us and comfort us, let our faith falter just a little to the storms in our lives? We may let the diagnosis or the fear of what is going to happen to me or my loved ones get between us and Jesus, blocking our sight of him. Now, I want you to listen to this. We don't lose faith. We still believe he is the Son of God and will protect us. We just have a minor panic attack, so to speak. I always say we have a brain fart. What I find interesting is that all 12 were facing the same situation. They were all in the same boat, being tossed around by the wind and the waves. They all faced the same storm, yet Peter was the only one to walk to Jesus, while the others stayed in the boat. Notice that when Peter got out of the boat, he was still in the storm. He still had the wind, rain, lightning, and thunder to deal with. He just at that time put trust in Jesus to see him through the storm. Peter found peace in the midst of the storm, where the other 11 were afraid for their lives. So, when you when you walk alongside Jesus in the storm of your life, Jesus won't necessarily take you out of the storm. You're still going to have to go through it. If you have financial burdens, you're still going to go through that journey. If you have cancer, for whatever reason, Jesus, being God, he won't take the cancer away. He will, though, like we've saw in this earth, he will walk with you through the storm. He will be with you. All you have to do is just get out of the boat in the midst of the storm and walk to him. Another good example of someone who weathered the storm was Job. We all know the story of Job. Devil was walking around in heaven, and God mentioned Job, saying, "Hey, look, look at my servant. He loves me with all of his heart." The devil said, "Yeah, he loves you now, but cause conflict in his life, cause something to happen, and he will reject you." So the devil put a storm in Job's life. When we hear this story, we hear how the devil put him not only in the storm, but in the center of it. And one day, the devil caused Job to lose everything. He lost livestock, fields, even his children. I mean, let's admit it. Job didn't face the storm. He faced the hurricane. He was in the eye of the hurricane. Yet, out of all of what happened to him, he never took his eyes off of God. He stayed steadfast in his love. And even though God kept him in the storm, Job never let it overtake him. In fact, even though he was in a raging storm, he still praised God. How many of us can say we can do that in our darkest hour? I'll be the first to admit, my wife has MS, when she goes through a bad episode, or we have financial issues, my first question is, why, God? What are you doing? Why are you doing this to me? Which I'm pretty sure at some point in our life we all have done. So as we leave here, my question to you is, when the storm of life rages against us, are we going to stay in the boat, be tossed around and afraid, or are we going to get out of the boat and walk towards Jesus while we are in the midst of the storm? Like I said, we're still going to go through life and have financial health issues where we are going to be in a storm. So, as I sign off, I just want you to ask yourself if you are going to be like the other 11. Are you going to stay in the boat, being tossed around by the waves, the storm, the lightning, be afraid of the lightning? Or are you going to be like Peter, get out of the boat, and while you're in the middle of the storm, are you going to be walking with Jesus? Are you going to let him comfort you in the midst of the storm? So like I said, I just want you to think about that, and throughout the week or month, um, next time you come up have a financial burden or you get bad news from your doctor, just think about that and try to figure out or decide which one you're going to do. Just remember, being like Peter, and at some point letting the storm distract you where you start to sink, doesn't mean you lost faith. It doesn't mean you stop believing in God. You just let the storm, you let the physical part of the storm conflict with your spirituality. It makes you question it. It honestly, we're human. We have questions on why God lets things happen in our lives. Um, just like I said, just when you go through things in your life, just remember that in the midst of the storm, Jesus is there to walk alongside you. And with that, I'm going to sign off, and I hope you guys enjoy your day.